Welcome everyone to the lecture presentation for this course on U.S. history, the colonial period through the Civil War and Reconstruction. Now, before we begin, I want to encourage students to do their best to take good notes of the lectures throughout the semester. And this is especially due to the fact that quite a bit of the lecture material will not be found in the textbook assigned for this class, okay? And much of the lecture content, as you will discover, is meant to provide students with additional concepts and theories and ways to analyze, the various key events that are narrated in the textbook. So this is why, as you'll see in the modules, this is why I assign the textbook readings before the lecture material. So again, referring to the modules, please follow the linear structure, the linear path of each module. Usually I begin with some kind of introduction, giving you sort of this broad background regarding what we're going to be exploring for that topic. And then I move on to the assigned readings. And then from the readings, I ask you to go over the lectures. Okay. And then following the lectures, there's also study questions, practice quiz, discussion, and so forth. So again, take good notes for the lecture, and you could take advantage of the fact that you could, if necessary, take repeated listenings to the lecture videos. And if you happen to be confused even after repeated listenings, feel free to email me, and I can clarify some of the concepts that you may find initially confusing. Now, moving on, as indicated in the title of the slide, our first topic of this course is called The Old World Meets the New World. And if you look at the slide, what seems to be depicted is a tense confrontation between two different groups here, two different peoples, encountering each other in the same region, the same land, right? And as you probably know, this is the land of the native inhabitants, Native Americans, right? And the Europeans, on the other hand, are crossing Atlantic to get to the so-called New World, which we'll discuss in a second, right? And, well, these were often, as mentioned, tense moments. In fact, maybe a more accurate title for this topic is The Old World Collides or Confronts the New World, right? But again, going to these terms, if you're not familiar with the Old World and the New World, well, here's what they refer to. The Old World, before 1492, when Columbus reached the New World, there was Europe, right? And its various civilizations, various empires, the Spanish Empire, English, Dutch, French, what have you. But also, to be technical, Europe, before 1492, as you probably know, had already established contact with other civilizations in other continents, like, let's say, Northern Africa, Asia, Asian continent, what we call the Islamic world back then, right? So there was already contact with those. But I have to say, when we're discussing this topic, the Old World meets the New World, we're really talking about the Europeans, because the other civilizations I just mentioned from other continents did not reach the New World, right? They were not settlers and conquerors of the New World after Columbus in 1492. Now, what refers to the New World in this context? Well, this is the Western Hemisphere, so to say, comprised of the Americas, right? North America and South America, and all the civilizations found in that region, the native inhabitants. And as we know, 1492 was the first time both worlds actually confronted each other, initiated by Columbus, of course, and then subsequent explorers, traders, and settlers, and colonizers who sailed, west across the Atlantic, right? Now, let me first say this. that in the past, in the study of U.S. history, especially, the first part of U.S. history, colonial period, past histories, and I say, when I say the past, let's say 1950s, and certainly before that, U.S. history was, or typically had its starting point with the discussion of the very first English settlers, settling in Virginia, and, the Puritans, the Pilgrims in New England. And this occurred during the early 1600s, Jamestown being the first major settlement in 1607. All right, so this approach, that is to say, starting with English colonial settlements in the New World, well, it's understandable why this used to be the traditional way, because in many ways the United States itself was a descendant of English civilization. Of course, this is true in many ways. We are still speaking English as the official language, right? We're still influenced by English culture, other institutions like legal tradition in the United States. Our laws are definitely fashioned upon English law, right? And then eventually what happens, we'll discuss in this class, there's going to be that eventual revolt against England, the mother country, so to say, by the 1770s, and then, of course, we'll have the establishment of the United States by 1776, July 4th. Now, in this course, we're not going to begin with English settlement, but we're going to reach further back and discuss the various European imperial colonizers that preceded the English after 1492 through, the end of the 1500s. And namely, we're talking about the Spanish Empire, the French, and to a lesser degree, the Dutch. Okay, they're coming over during that 16th century and exploring and colonizing and trading and so forth with New World inhabitants. And just like this slide, their experiences were often fraught with tension and, mistrust. But actually, we'll also discuss moments when those encounters actually led to mutual understanding and mutual accommodation. More on that later as this lecture unfolds. Okay, so why begin U.S. colonial history, in this course at least, before English settlement? Why begin starting with 1492 through, let's say, 1600? Well, this is my argument here, that if we do so, if we take this approach, we're going to see that the earliest encounters between the New World and the European settlers before the English came, you had, again, the Spanish, French, and Dutch. This period would actually influence, and this contact would influence American civilization that formed by 1776, as mentioned. And, from 1776, we know that, this American civilization would thrive, and still so today. So how could this be? We're talking about non-English colonizers again, and their confrontation with the native inhabitants, right? Well, hopefully this will become clear as we finish this topic of Old World, New World. Okay, in a way, I'm foreshadowing the argument here, right? That this encounter with the Old World and New World would actually influence American civilization, though it does involve the English, right? So again, we would be remiss if we didn't discuss the pre-English, if you will, European encounter with the original inhabitants of the New World, and the various ways that they sized up each other, right? As they kind of are doing here, this slide, right? And the ways they negotiated both civilizations, right, in that initial encounter. Now, as you likely know, the term Indian is a misnomer, right? That's because Columbus was attempting to find Asia, and he thought he landed in a part of Asia that we call India, right, today. we still refer to India as the nation, right? Back then, India and Asia, well, these places were the wealthiest parts of the world. And therefore, it doesn't surprise us that various European empires are trying to initiate trade and gain wealth with all this wealth found in Asia, like India and so forth. So, as you probably know, Columbus made a colossal misunderstanding, right, in encountering the first people he met in the New World. He called them Indians. And of course, he eventually realized, okay, this is not India, but a whole different, unexplored part of the world that was unknown to them, to the entire old world, and vice versa, of course, right? The New World inhabitants had no idea of old world inhabitants. Speaking of Indian, it has this durability, this inexplicable durability of a term, right? Indian, even though it's a complete misnomer, has nothing to do with India, but you'll still see the term around. I will use the term occasionally, interchangeably with natives, right, or original inhabitants, and that's because the term American Indian is actually still, in some cases more preferred by some Native Americans today. Okay, so I use the term Indian or American Indian. Now, within the European imaginary, all Native Americans, Native inhabitants belong to one single race. And of course, they're first called Indians, right? Well, that includes all natives throughout North and South America, right? They all belong to the same racial category. Now, we ask this, did the Indians, so to say, see themselves in that way as all belonging to the same race? Of course not. Right? There's so much diversity and, cultural differences, different tribes, different linguistic communities, different cultures. So the first thing we need to grasp is the enormous diversity characterizing native civilizations who inhabited the continents of the Americas. And this is similar to the diversity across the Atlantic, right? In the old world, there's so much diversity in Europe, right? The French, English, Spanish, Irish, they're all different from each other. And so too is the case with the various native civilizations in the New World. Yet, despite this fact, Europeans tended to lump all native civilizations in a single monolithic category, this racial category of, again, Indians, right? So again, what we're going to emphasize in the following videos is the tremendous diversity characterizing the different peoples of the New World. And this acknowledgement, it explodes this more simplistic, facile categorization of natives as all belonging to the single category of, this racial category of Indians, right? So let's explore this topic with the next slide.